Now joining me is Douglas Murray, Associate Editor of The Spectator and the best-selling author of The War on the West. Douglas, let's start with Elon Musk's Twitter. His takeover is leading to the release of the Twitter files, documenting how the social media giant was censoring speech, targeting conservatives, protecting the Biden campaign, and even suppressing renowned medical professionals who spoke out against lockdowns and school closures. It looks like every worst fear held about big tech is being confirmed.
Yes, it does. I don't know about you, Rita, but it also feels as if every one of my friends turns out to have been subjected to a Twitter suppression of some kind in recent years. I mean, it's astonishing, as you say. I mean, people like incredibly respected figures like Stanford Professor Jay Bhattacharya, to journalists and others had these things being done on their accounts that basically suppressed what they were saying, stopped what they were saying getting out to the audience that they assumed they were speaking to. You and I and other people who'd watched this closely knew that there was something going on behind the scenes at Twitter. But the Twitter files that Elon Musk has been releasing through Matt Taibbi and Barry Weiss are really confirming all of our worst fears. And there's one other thing, by the way, I think that's come out since we last spoke, Rita, which is the extraordinary story of Jim Baker. This is a man who turned out to be working at Twitter. They will say, by the way, that they say, oh, it's a conspiracy theory if you talk about any of this stuff. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is a flat-out conspiracy that was happening at Twitter.
Yes.
Jim Baker was an FBI lawyer who went into work at Twitter. He was working at Twitter to the extent that when Elon Musk asked the files about Twitter to be sent to Matt Taibbi, they were infiltrated in the middle of the process, inserting himself, who but James Baker, who tried to make sure even at that stage that the new owner of the company couldn't get the truth out about the company to an independent journalist. What was this FBI guy doing inside Twitter? As I say, this is not a conspiracy theory. Turns out there was a conspiracy inside Twitter, and we should really learn a lot more. There should be congressional hearings and much more.
Much, much more. And on Jim Baker, he was a massive figure in the entire Russian collusion hoax during his time at the FBI. So to have this discredited figure then at Twitter wielding enormous power, extraordinary. Now to California, and Governor Gavin Newsom there he's got a reparations task force. Yes, that's a thing. And they've come up with some figures that descendants of free or enslaved black people could receive. So people who have never been slaves may be receiving more than $223,000 each from people who have never owned slaves. That doesn't seem to make much sense, Douglas.
It doesn't stack up, does it, other than in the mind of Gavin Newsom, who's so desperate to trawl for votes that he'll float this sort of idea out there. As you say, this would involve the people who never experienced slavery receiving money from people who never practiced slavery. I can think of very few other ways. I mean, I have been wondering, I think we've wondered together, Rita, over the years, is there anything Gavin Newsom can do to make California even worse? He's already made it into this sort of urine-drenched, piss-stained slum where everyone pays sky-high taxes and has to live in really tent city-like environments. So when we've wondered, what could Gavin Newsom do to make California even more unlivable, making people pay reparations for something they didn't do to people who haven't suffered? Goodness me, Rita, Gavin Newsom's done it again. He's come up with a fresh idea for how to make his state more of a hellhole.
And I tell you, if there are going to be any new COVID restrictions, he'll be the first one in. He'll be jumping at that because, like you said, he just looks for new ways to inflict pain on those. But you know what? You vote, you get what you vote for, and they keep voting for him. So they're welcome
And
to.
personally, Rita, I've got a business idea. I'm going to go to California. I'm going to set up a totally crock business, certifying people to pretend that they are actually the descendants of slaves, so they can all get 233,000, and I can get a 10% cut. If this whole thing's just going to become the clear fraud that it is, why don't we all just get in on it?
I'm there. I will be your vice president of that firm. Now, talking about the race obsessed, what is it about America's race-obsessed elite and their obsession with the royal family and their hatred for the royal family and other British institutions?
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. You know, America is so strong, so culturally strong, that when it gets a cold, we do as well in the rest of the English-speaking world. And I do think, and I've obviously written about this at some length in recent years, I do think that we've all basically, in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Britain in particular, we've sort of absorbed some of the race obsession of America. You know, most people in Britain, for instance, they don't think about Meghan Markle and think, oh, there's a black woman. They don't think about race like that. They'd be surprised to learn that she does and her husband does. But as a result, this strange American race obsession has been inserted into not just Britain, but to the British royal family, to the extent now, as we saw the other day, that an innocent lady in waiting of the late Queen asks a lady who's dressed in African tribal dress and who's changed her name to an African name where she's from. And suddenly Meghan and Harry get this new wind behind them of, oh, we can prove that the royal family is racist. Here's another outrageous racist incident. They look for it everywhere. It's not there. It's just not there. But they are going to continue to eke out their careers on the pretense that it is. And I just hope that the audience in America dwindles for that in time, as it certainly will have done in Australia and in Britain.
Oh, absolutely. I think the only people buying their story are the left in America. And just quickly, on the race-obsessed elite, they seem to care so much about historic slavery, but we don't hear anything from them about modern slavery. You've written and talked about this a lot. There are millions of people in slavery right now. Indeed, more people are enslaved right now than any time in human history.
That's right. That's right. In sheer numbers terms, that's the case. Many more than in the 19th century when slavery was legal. Vast parts of Africa, some of which I visited, where slavery still goes on. In the Far East, where it goes on. In the Middle East. If people want to talk about slavery, about reparations and all this sort of thing, why don't they, instead of tearing open old wounds and crying about their hurt, go and deal with real crimes that are going on today? That would be a useful exertion of energy. But of course, that requires people to do something, to notice something, and to risk something. So much easier to not have to go through any of that pain.
Absolutely. Douglas Murray, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining me tonight.